Karen stomped into the crowded office, her nostrils flaring as she scanned the room. Her beady eyes settled on a new employee named Samantha, who was chatting animatedly with a few colleagues. Normally, Karen relished the attention, but today she was on a mission. "Excuse me," Karen announced, her shrill voice cutting through the chatter. "I need to speak to the manager immediately. There's an emergency." The room fell silent as everyone turned to stare at Karen. The manager, a harried-looking man named Dave, approached her warily. "What's the problem, Karen?" "That woman over there is wearing perfume," Karen spat, pointing an accusatory finger at Samantha. "I'm deathly allergic, and she's putting my life in danger." Dave blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry, but we have a very clear policy about fragrances in the office. Samantha, could you please step outside and remove the perfume?" Samantha's face fell. "But I'm not wearing any perfume. This is just my natural scent." She glanced around the room, confusion and embarrassment evident on her features. Karen, however, was already nodding triumphantly. "I knew it. She's lying. Get her out of here before I have an asthma attack." Dave hesitated, torn between Karen's insistence and Samantha's protests. "I'm really sorry, Samantha, but we have to err on the side of caution. Could you please step outside for a few minutes?" Samantha opened her mouth to argue, but one look at the unyielding expressions on Karen and Dave's faces told her it was a losing battle. Shoulders slumped, she turned and walked out of the office, leaving behind a sea of bewildered and uncomfortable colleagues. As soon as Samantha was out of sight, Karen's demeanor changed. A smug grin spread across her face, and she strolled back to her desk, humming a self-satisfied tune. She hadn't been lying about the allergy, but that was merely a convenient excuse to get rid of the new girl who was stealing the spotlight. What Karen didn't know, however, was that the entire incident had been captured on the office's security cameras. The footage showed her calmly spraying herself with body spray just moments before her confrontation with Samantha. The evidence was damning, and it was only a matter of time before her deceit was exposed. As the day wore on, Karen basked in the attention she had garnered. She flounced around the office, reveling in the sympathetic glances and whispers of her coworkers. Samantha, meanwhile, sat alone in the break room, her eyes red from crying. But unbeknownst to Karen, the HR manager, a no-nonsense woman named Susan, had been reviewing the security footage. She had seen the incriminating footage and was now formulating a plan to confront the entitled and manipulative Karen. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown that would shake the very foundation of the office, and Karen had no idea what was about to hit her. The next morning, Karen strutted into the office, her head held high and a smug expression etched on her face. She had gotten away with her little stunt the day before, and she was feeling more powerful than ever. As Karen approached her desk, she noticed Susan, the HR manager, standing there with a stern look on her face. Karen's steps faltered, and she felt a twinge of unease in the pit of her stomach. "Karen, can I see you in my office for a moment?" Susan's voice was calm, but there was an underlying edge to it that made Karen's heart skip a beat. "Of course, Susan," Karen replied, trying to sound nonchalant as she followed the HR manager to her office. Once they were both seated, Susan leaned forward, her piercing gaze fixed on Karen. "I've been reviewing the security footage from yesterday, and I must say, I'm quite surprised by what I saw." Karen's face paled, and she felt a bead of sweat trickle down her forehead. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, desperately trying to maintain her composure. "Oh, I think you do," Susan said, her tone dripping with disapproval. "The footage clearly shows you spraying yourself with body spray before confronting Samantha about her perfume." Karen's mouth went dry as she realized the game was up. She opened and closed her mouth, unable to find the words to defend herself. "You lied, Karen," Susan continued, her voice rising in volume. "You lied about having an allergy to get Samantha removed from the office, and you did it in the most manipulative and unprofessional way possible. Karen shrunk back in her chair, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "I'm afraid I have no choice but to issue you a formal warning," Susan said, her expression hardening. "If this kind of behavior happens again, I'll have no choice but to terminate your employment." Karen's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the gravity of the situation. She had always been able to get away with her entitled behavior, but this time, the consequences were real. She nodded mutely, her mind racing as she tried to come up with a way to salvage the situation. As Karen left Susan's office, she felt a familiar sense of anger and resentment bubbling up inside her. How dare they accuse her of lying? Didn't they know who she was? She had always been the center of attention, and she wasn't about to let a few security cameras take that away from her. With a newfound determination, Karen set out to exact her revenge. She wasn't about to let Samantha or anyone else ruin her reign at the office. She would find a way to get back at them, no matter the cost. As the day wore on, Karen's mind was consumed with thoughts of revenge. She couldn't believe that Susan had the audacity to call her out in front of the entire office. How dare she threaten Karen's employment over a harmless prank? Simmering with anger, Karen began to hatch a plan. She knew that she had to strike back, but she had to be careful. She couldn't risk losing her job, not when she had worked so hard to climb the corporate ladder. Karen's eyes narrowed as she glanced over at Samantha's desk. The young woman sat there, oblivious to the storm brewing in Karen's mind. Karen couldn't help but feel a surge of resentment towards her. Samantha was new to the company, yet she had managed to capture the attention of her colleagues with her bubbly personality and infectious enthusiasm. "Well, we can't have that, can we?" Karen muttered under her breath, a devious plan forming in her mind. That evening, as the rest of the office emptied out, Karen remained behind. She knew that Samantha often worked late, and she was determined to seize the opportunity. As the hallways grew quiet, Karen crept towards Samantha's desk, her heart pounding with excitement. She quickly rummaged through the drawers, searching for anything that could be used against the unsuspecting woman. Finally, her eyes landed on a stack of documents. Samantha's performance review. Karen's lips curled into a wicked grin as she snatched the papers, quickly scanning the contents. "Well, well, well," she murmured, her fingers tracing the words on the page. "Looks like little Samantha isn't as perfect as she seems." With a triumphant chuckle, Karen carefully tucked the documents into her purse and made her way out of the office, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew exactly how she was going to use this information to her advantage. The next morning, Karen waltzed into the office, her head held high and a smug expression plastered on her face. She couldn't wait to see the look on Samantha's face when she revealed the truth about her performance review. As Samantha approached her desk, Karen pounced, her voice dripping with false concern. "Oh, Samantha, I'm so sorry to hear about your poor performance review. I had no idea you were struggling so much." Samantha's eyes widened in shock, and she instinctively glanced towards the HR manager's office, her heart racing. "What are you talking about, Karen? I haven't received any performance review." Karen's grin widened, and she leaned in closer, her voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper. "Oh, but you have, my dear. And it's not exactly glowing, is it?" Samantha felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the gravity of the situation. Karen had somehow gotten her hands on confidential information, and she was using it to torment her. Panic set in as Samantha frantically tried to think of a way to defuse the situation. But Karen was already reveling in her victory, secure in the knowledge that she had the upper hand. She had struck back, and this time, the consequences would be far more severe than a mere warning. Samantha's heart raced as she tried to process Karen's words. How could she have gotten her hands on a confidential performance review? And more importantly, what was she planning to do with that information? Swallowing hard, Samantha tried to maintain her composure. "Karen, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't received any performance review, and I'm certainly not struggling at my job." But Karen's grin only widened and Samantha knew that she was in trouble. "Oh, but I think you are, dear," Karen purred, her eyes glinting with malice. "And I have the proof right here." She patted her purse, the unspoken threat hanging in the air. Samantha glanced around the office, her eyes pleading for help, but none of her colleagues seemed willing to intervene. They all knew how manipulative and vindictive Karen could be, and they didn't want to be the next target of her wrath. Feeling cornered, Samantha decided to take a different approach. "Karen, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish, but I can assure you that I'm doing my job to the best of my ability. If there are any issues, I'm sure they can be resolved through proper channels." Karen's expression darkened, and Samantha could see the fury burning in her eyes. "Oh, I don't think so, Samantha. You see, I've got a little leverage here, and I'm not afraid to use it." Before Samantha could respond, Karen turned and strode towards the HR manager's office, her heels clicking on the tile floor. Samantha watched in horror as she burst through the door, her voice carrying across the office. "Susan, we need to talk. I have some serious concerns about Samantha's performance, and I think it's time we address them." Samantha felt her stomach twist with dread. She knew that Karen was about to unleash her malicious plan, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. All she could do was brace herself for the inevitable fallout. As Karen and Susan disappeared into the office, the rest of the employees watched in stunned silence, their eyes darting between Samantha and the closed door. The tension in the air was palpable, and Samantha knew that her world was about to be turned upside down. She had always tried to be a good employee, to work hard and contribute to the team. But now, it seemed that all of her efforts were for naught, thanks to the relentless machinations of a woman who was determined to destroy her. Samantha took a deep breath, trying to steady her shaking hands. She knew that she would have to face this challenge head-on, no matter the consequences. But as she waited for the inevitable, she couldn't help but wonder how much more she could take before finally breaking. The minutes ticked by like hours as Samantha waited anxiously for Karen and Susan to emerge from the HR manager's office. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she could feel the eyes of her colleagues burning into her back. Finally, the door opened, and Karen strode out, a triumphant smirk plastered on her face. Samantha watched with bated breath as Susan followed, her expression grave. "Samantha, could you please come in here?" Susan's voice was calm, but Samantha could detect a hint of regret behind it. Swallowing hard, Samantha rose from her desk and made her way into the office, casting a wary glance at Karen as she passed. Once inside, Susan gestured for Samantha to take a seat. "I've been reviewing the concerns that Karen has brought to my attention, and I'm afraid I have no choice but to place you on a performance improvement plan." Samantha's eyes widened in shock. "But I don't understand. I've been doing my job to the best of my ability. What concerns are you talking about?" Susan sighed heavily. "It seems that there have been some issues with your work performance, including missed deadlines and subpar quality of work. Karen has brought this to my attention, and she's provided some documentation to support her claims." Samantha felt her stomach drop as she realized what was happening. Karen had somehow gotten her hands on her confidential performance review and was using it against her. "But that can't be true," Samantha protested, her voice tinged with desperation. "I've been working hard, and I haven't received any feedback about my performance. This is all just a lie." Susan held up a hand, silencing Samantha. "I'm sorry, Samantha, but the evidence is quite compelling. Karen has presented documentation that corroborates her claims, and I have no choice but to take this seriously." Samantha stared at Susan, her eyes filled with disbelief and betrayal. How could the HR manager believe Karen's lies over her own efforts and dedication? "This isn't fair," Samantha cried, her voice quivering with emotion. "Karen is the one who lied about the perfume allergy, and now she's using that against me. Surely you can see that she's manipulating the situation for her own gain." Susan's expression softened, and she reached across the desk to place a hand on Samantha's arm. I understand your frustration, Samantha, but the fact is that I have to go based on the information that's been presented to me. I'm sorry, but you'll need to work with Karen and myself to address these performance issues. Samantha felt her heart sinking as the gravity of the situation dawned on her. Karen had won, and there was nothing she could do about it. She was trapped, a victim of the entitled woman's relentless pursuit of power and control. As Samantha left the HR office, she could feel the weight of her colleagues' stares, their whispers and murmurs only adding to her sense of isolation and despair. She knew that she had to find a way to fight back, but the odds seemed stacked against her. With a heavy heart, Samantha returned to her desk, her mind racing as she tried to come up with a plan. She couldn't let Karen win, not without a fight. As the days passed, Samantha found herself struggling to keep up with the demands of her newly implemented performance improvement plan. Every task, every deadline, every interaction with her colleagues seemed to be scrutinized and criticized by both Karen and the HR manager, Susan. Samantha couldn't help but feel that the deck was stacked against her. She knew that Karen had somehow manipulated the situation, but proving it was proving to be an uphill battle. Any time she tried to raise concerns or defend herself, she was shut down, with Karen's evidence taking precedence over Samantha's protests. The stress of the situation began to take a toll on Samantha's mental and physical health. She found herself constantly on edge, jumping at the slightest criticism and dreading every interaction with Karen. The once vibrant and enthusiastic employee had become a shadow of her former self, her confidence shattered by the relentless onslaught of negativity. One day, as Samantha was working late, trying to meet yet another unreasonable deadline, Karen approached her desk, a sickly sweet smile plastered on her face. "Oh, Samantha, I couldn't help but notice how hard you've been working lately," Karen cooed, her voice dripping with false concern. "Are you sure you're managing all right? I'd hate for you to burn yourself out." Samantha gritted her teeth, her hands clenching into fists as she fought the urge to lash out. "I'm fine, Karen," she replied, her tone clipped and professional. Karen's eyes narrowed, and she leaned in closer, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know, Samantha, I've been thinking. Maybe we could work together to get you back on track. I'd be more than happy to mentor you, help you get your performance up to par." Samantha stared at Karen, her mind racing. Was this some kind of trap? Was Karen trying to get closer to her, to find new ways to undermine her? "That's very kind of you, Karen," Samantha said cautiously. "But I think I'd prefer to work through this on my own. I appreciate the offer, but I don't want to impose on your time." Karen's smile faltered, and Samantha could see the irritation flashing in her eyes. "Well, suit yourself," the older woman snapped, straightening up and turning on her heel. "But don't say I didn't try to help." As Karen stalked away, Samantha let out a shaky breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that Karen's help was anything but altruistic, and she wasn't about to let the woman worm her way into her life. But as Samantha stared at the ever-growing pile of work on her desk, she couldn't help but wonder how much longer she could keep up this relentless pace. The pressure was mounting, and she knew that something had to give. With a sigh, Samantha turned her attention back to her work, determined to prove her worth and show Karen that she wasn't going to be so easily defeated. As the days turned into weeks, Samantha's situation only seemed to worsen. The constant pressure and scrutiny from both Karen and the HR manager, Susan, had taken a heavy toll on her mental and physical well-being. Samantha found herself working longer and longer hours, desperately trying to meet the ever-increasing demands of her performance improvement plan. The once vibrant and enthusiastic employee had become a shell of her former self, her eyes constantly red from exhaustion and the strain of holding back tears. Despite her best efforts, Samantha couldn't seem to catch a break. Anytime she thought she had made progress, Karen would find a new way to undermine her, whether it was pointing out a minor mistake or gossiping about her incompetence to the rest of the office. One day, as Samantha was hunched over her desk, Frantically typing away, Karen sauntered over, a smug expression on her face. "Oh, Samantha, you're still here," she said, feigning surprise. "I thought you would have gone home by now. Isn't it past your bedtime?" Samantha gritted her teeth, her fingers trembling as she tried to maintain her composure. "I'm just trying to get this project finished, Karen," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Karen hissed, shaking her head in mock sympathy. "Well, we can't have you burning the midnight oil. Now can we? You need to be well rested if you're going to have any hope of meeting your deadlines." Samantha felt a surge of anger and frustration, but she knew that lashing out would only play into Karen's hands. Instead, she took a deep breath and forced a smile. "I appreciate your concern, Karen, but I'm fine. I just want to make sure I get this done right." Karen's eyes narrowed, and Samantha could see the gears turning in her mind. "Well, suit yourself," the older woman said, her tone dripping with condescension. "But don't come crying to me when you end up in the hospital from exhaustion." With that, Karen turned and sauntered back to her desk, her laughter echoing through the empty office. Samantha stared at her retreating back, her hands clenched into fists. She knew that Karen was trying to push her, to break her down, and she was determined not to give in. But as the days wore on, Samantha could feel her resolve slipping. The constant stress and pressure were taking a toll, and she found herself making more and more mistakes, only fueling Karen's relentless campaign against her. Samantha knew that she had to do something, that she couldn't let Karen win. But with the HR manager firmly on Karen's side, she felt trapped, with no way out. As she stared at the ever-growing pile of work on her desk, Samantha couldn't help but wonder how much more she could take before she finally reached her breaking point. The tipping point came one fateful day, when Samantha's exhaustion and stress finally caught up with her. She had been working late into the night, trying to complete a critical project for an important client, when suddenly, her computer screen went dark. Samantha let out a cry of frustration as she realized that her laptop had died, taking all of her unsaved work with it. In her panic, she didn't even think to reach for the charger, her mind consumed by the thought of having to start from scratch. Tears of despair welled up in her eyes as she frantically searched for the power cord, her hands shaking with the effort. But it was no use. The laptop was completely drained, and there was no way to salvage her work. Just then, the door to the office flew open, and Karen sauntered in, a triumphant grin on her face. "Well, well, well, look who's still here," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I thought I told you to go home and get some rest, Samantha." Samantha felt her blood boil as she looked up at the smug woman, all of the pent-up frustration and anguish finally bubbling to the surface. "You did this, didn't you?" she accused, her voice trembling with raw emotion. "You sabotaged my laptop, just like you've been sabotaging me this whole time." Karen's eyes widened in mock surprise, but Samantha could see the glint of satisfaction in her gaze. "My dear, I have no idea what you're talking about," Karen said, feigning innocence. "I was simply concerned for your well-being, that's all." Samantha let out a bitter laugh, the tears now streaming down her face. "Concerned? You've been trying to destroy me from the moment I set foot in this office. And now, you finally succeeded." Karen's expression darkened, and Samantha could see the triumph in her eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about, Samantha. But if you're feeling so overwhelmed, maybe it's time to consider a different career path." With that, Karen turned and strode out of the office, leaving Samantha alone with her shattered dreams and broken spirit. In that moment, Samantha knew that she couldn't go on like this. The constant pressure, the endless scrutiny, and the relentless undermining had broken her, and she couldn't see a way out. Defeated, Samantha gathered her belongings and walked out of the office, her head held low. As she made her way to her car, she couldn't help but feel a sense of bitter irony. She had worked so hard to prove herself, only to be crushed by the machinations of an entitled and manipulative woman. But as Samantha drove home, a spark of determination began to flicker within her. She may have lost this battle, but she wasn't about to let Karen win the war. She would find a way to expose the truth, to bring Karen's deceit to light, and reclaim her own dignity. With a newfound sense of purpose, Samantha set her sights on a future where she could finally break free from the clutches of Karen's relentless pursuit of power and control. The journey ahead would be difficult, but Samantha was more determined than ever to emerge victorious.